Thank you all so much for being here. This is a really exciting day and the product of literally years of hard work. I remember it was several years ago that Elena came to me with this brilliant idea of doing a big exhibition to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the beginning of hip hop. It has been an incredible journey for us, really exciting with a huge amount of work. In addition to thanking the curators, I'd like to thank all the speakers, the advisory board, the lenders, the colleagues throughout the college and beyond who helped make the exhibition and symposium possible. I want to thank, again, the Kobe Foundation, the New York State Council on the Arts, and the Couture Council for helping to fund the exhibition and the symposium. I want to point out to you, as you see here, that some of the materials that are going to be shown at the symposium today are subject to copyright fair use principles. So for that reason, we respectfully ask that you do not copy, film, or take photographs of the presentation images themselves. But we do encourage you to take pictures of the speakers, and of course the screen image can be in the background of that. This is, you know, the two speakers, the two organizers, Liz and Elena, are going to begin the entire symposium by being in conversation about the production of the exhibition, the concept, and the entire world and history of hip hop. So please join me in welcoming them today.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Huge thank you to Dr. Brown and Valerie, who've been so supportive of this exhibition, and to the amazing staff at MFIT who helped make it possible. I hope that you will all go see the exhibition across the street during the lunch break or afterwards. But we're going to talk a little bit about the themes in the exhibition very briefly, but then I want to kind of get into more conversation with Elena, who is such a font of knowledge on the intersection of hip hop and fashion. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank our advisory committee. You'll see this collage in the exhibition, and a lot of these images were donated to us for their use by our advisory committee as well as the Apollo Theater, and they really just capture the dynamics of hip hop and fashion throughout the years. So very quickly, I want to talk about just some of the themes that you'll see within the exhibition. For example, in our first two galleries, we look at very early spaces where we observe hip hop fashion. And one of the most kind of interesting and dynamic is the Disco Fever nightclub. We were very lucky to interview Sal Aboletto. And we also look at early styles, authentic styles from people who are creating hip hop culture from the beginning. For example, in the middle of this photo, you'll see an ensemble from Popmaster Fable, a breakdancer who was dancing with Rocksteady. And then we also look at media. And of course, Elena will be in conversation with the amazing Ralph McDaniels this afternoon. As we move into the exhibition, you'll notice when you get into the space that it's not a chronological look, but more of a thematic look. And so we look at the ways that different kind of garments and ensembles and themes have been a conduit to communicate hip hop style throughout the years. And we also worked with an absolutely amazing exhibition designer, Courtney Sloan, who has very deep roots in hip hop, and she was able to kind of bring some of our ideas and our energies to life within the exhibition. So just a few of the things that we touched on, for example, are the thread of Afrocentricity that has been present in hip hop fashion throughout the years, and we see it expressed in different ways. Of course, we have the baggy years, which is most kind of associated with hip hop, but definitely you'll see in the exhibition that there's so much more to hip hop style. But amazing designers on the West Coast. We, of course, focus mostly on New York, but Carl Kanai and Cross Color are so important on the West Coast. We look at the idea of customization, and you'll hear a lot more about that today further into the exhibition, as well as the role of kind of celebrity and celebrity stylists such as Misa Hilton and the personal style of individual celebrities. When you enter the exhibition on our right side, you'll see a whole kind of panel that looks at the relationship between hip hop and different brands, and we see how this relationship has evolved from the 70s to today. And we end the exhibition with a section on hip-hop glam, and looking at a contemporary moment in which hip-hop artists are not just world celebrities, but really drivers of avant-garde fashion. So we do hope that you'll come and check out the exhibition. This is just a tiny, tiny preview of what we have on display. We have over 150 objects from over 50 lenders. But now I would like to kind of talk to Elena a little bit more. She pitched us the idea for this exhibition, but way back in 2018. So please, first of all, Elena, can you talk about your background, your expertise in hip hop and fashion?
Simply put, I'm from Brooklyn, New York, raised and still in Brooklyn. I'm 50 with hip hop, so I am, I can speak to it because this was part of my childhood. For me, living in Brooklyn in a traditional Hispanic conservative household, I actually got to kind of reach out and touch hip hop through a cousin of mine who had moved with us temporarily when he had gotten into some gang activity in the Bronx. And when he came and moved with us and came to sit on my stoop with his big boombox, I was able to get, now I understand those were collecting the oral histories of what was actually taking place. I was hearing firsthand what was happening, just, a couple subway stops away. So for me, my introduction was really through film and watching Wild Style and Beat Street, and it was something I could relate to because it was a reflection of me on that screen.
But much later, you kind of formed a professional relationship with the intersection. Elena is a journalist as well as a professor, a co-curator, a PhD student. So she's a lot.
She's a PhD student too. We've been working on our PhD while we've been doing this. So just wanted to say that out.
But she's still an active curator, an active journalist. But that profession goes back to the 90s. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I never had an intention of being a fashion journalist. That I kind of stumbled upon. I went to NYU for journalism, and I didn't break into the business until 1996 when I landed my job at Fairchild Publications. I started off writing about young menswear, outerwear, men's slacks for the now defunct DNR, and then in the 2000s I started working as a contributing editor of Women's Wear Daily. For me, my career grew parallel to the market that I covered. Early on, I was getting phone calls from PR and marketing executives and sales executives from brands like Mecca USA, PNB Nation, FUBU, Maurice Malone, and several others. And I recognized those brands, but they weren't a part of my resource list when I first took the job. So I kind of took a really cautious approach to writing about it at the publication. It wasn't part of their day-to-day coverage. I remember, literally putting a proposal together and presenting it to my editor, and he was completely open. He was like, I hired you here to find out what's going on, so if this is what's happening, he gave me the green light. And within a few months, I started getting my page one story about how Federated Department Stores was going to really make a big push towards urban fashion. And the rest, you could say, is history. By the time the celebrities were really pushing for their clothing brands, folks like, Sean Combs, I got to outscoop the New York Times. I was really proud of that. When Andy Hilfiger launched J.Lo's line, I would get the first exclusive, so on and so forth.
So this exhibition was really made possible by kind of Elena's expertise, but also this wide network of people that she's developed relationships with over the years. And one of the most important things I think I learned from Elena and hip hop and fashion is how kind of the New York fashion business works. And this idea about we know that hip hop fashion has for so long been sidelined outside of the mainstream industry. And of course, we can look at, wider patterns of oppression. This is coming out of Black and brown communities, but what I learned from Elena was that, this was also something that was kind of dominated by the young men's category. And young men's was not considered like a flashy section of fashion by 7th Avenue. And it really took...
And still isn't.
Yeah, it really took massive amounts of sales for kind of the mainstream industry to take it seriously. But, you went from being a journalist to being a scholar. Can you talk a little bit about your first book in 2012 and what made you want to kind of academically look at the intersection of hip hop and the fashion industry?
Sure. So shortly after 9/11, I ended up no longer working in media and kind of transitioned into wanting to write my first book. And that was really a combination of the work that I had done. I felt that there had been enough time for a full examination as to how exactly this industry had happened. How did it get to be part of fashion? And it took many years, believe it or not. I had the idea in 2002. The book did not happen till 2012. I knocked on a lot of doors. And interesting enough, it would be Facebook that would get me my first book deal. An old editor that had worked at Honey Magazine was now a book scout, and I ended up hitting her up on Facebook and literally within 2-3 months, I had a book deal. That first book is very, very important because it becomes, one of the first historical narratives that really traces the evolution of youth fashion all the way to this hip hop fashion and the changes and transitions that we saw in retail. And then there are several case studies along the way. I write about Echo Unlimited, FUBU, and of course, Cross Colors, April Walker, Carl Kanai, the musicians, and really kind of put it in historical and social context.
So one of the designers you wrote about in your first book and who we had such an amazing pleasure to include in the exhibition in a number of ways was Dapper Dan. So Dapper Dan kicked off our first event in connection with the exhibition way back, I think in 2020.
Literally, probably weeks before the pandemic had happened, and then life changed for all of us.
And he very graciously granted us an interview as well as loans for the exhibition. But can you talk a little bit about where Dapper Dan was in kind of culture when you were writing your book?
Oh, he was underground and nowhere to be found, and trust me, I was looking high and low. And imagine, here I am writing this book, and he's like the living urban legend that I couldn't find. I got as close as I could. I ended up interviewing people that had shopped at his store, and one person who had worked at his store, so that was as close as I got, and I was fascinated by his story. At that time, which would have been 2008 or 9 when I was writing the book, there wasn't much that you can Google the way you can Google today. But life is really interesting. In doing my research and putting in the key search codes, I stumbled upon a document by then Supreme Court nominee Sonia Sotomayor. And in that extensive public document online, I found a few lines that had mentioned when she was an attorney going after Dapper Dan. So that actually became really, really important, a small piece of research that really then gets retold and retold in other stories, but I was really happy that I was the one that found it first. Dapper Dan is an amazing person. I got to see him last night at the shop at Marc Jacobs, where he ended up giving kind of a fire chat talk with Roski Diaz, and then he had Rakim perform, which was really exciting for anyone who's a big hip hop fan, really one of the top MCs, and we can argue about that. So Dapper Dan had this 24-hour, 7-day-a-week custom shop in Harlem. And of course, we talk about him and glorify him today, but it wasn't like he had the shoppers that everybody was looking to have walk on Rodeo Drive, right? At that time, we're talking about the hustlers, the gamblers, and he quickly, became famous and well-known for making these, one-of-ones custom attire. He would take, the luxury brand logos of the time and still popular today, right? Your MCM, your Louis Vuitton, and deconstruct their garments and then reconstruct a new silhouette and garment that hadn't even been created by those brands. And, at that time, no one was really paying attention. Hip-hop magazines and music videos were. And then Mike Tyson, Mitch Green incident happens, and all of a sudden he's on mainstream radar, and then the pressure gets on. Another fun fact and find that many people don't talk about is that simultaneously, while Dapper Dan was making custom clothes for his customers, he also had a custom body shop on East Harlem. So well before Pimp My Ride, he was doing car interiors along with the clothes, which was really interesting in terms of, we talk about early hip hop in the 90s and the hookup. Well, they hooked up to their car too.
So definitely go onto our Museum of FIT YouTube channel, and you can check out our earlier conversation with Dapper Dan. But besides Dap, who are some of the designers that you really, in the exhibition, that you really feel have been kind of major in shaping hip hop style and getting it out to mainstream fashion?
That's a difficult question to answer because I feel like every designer deserves their flowers and their respect, right? So we can start early on with Cross Colors on the West Coast, Carl Jones and TJ Walker, who were able in 4 years to show that this could be a $100 million business that spoke about unity and used the colors of Afrocentricity to really promote their fashions. We can talk about, of course, April Walker being among our early female pioneers to launch Walker Wear, who strategically decided to kind of play on the back fence and let the clothes speak for themselves before she introduced herself into the world that she was a female designer designing menswear. Carl Kanai, who is originally, grew up in Brooklyn. He's Costa Rican and Panamanian, and eventually we moved to LA, being part of Cross Color's larger umbrella, Threads for Life, really one of the only brands that fell under that umbrella. Cross Colors had this amazing idea, which is still very much valid today, this idea of wanting to be a hub for Black and brown designers and kind of putting them under their corporate umbrella so then they could work out deals on production, right? That would make a lot of sense. And April would have been part of that, but by the time the brand was going through some challenging times, she wasn't able to fulfill that, but Carl did. Carl was able to get Tupac to be in his advertisements for free simply because Tupac believed in him and the idea of creating fashion for Black people. Custom tailors, I mean, everyone hears about DAP in Harlem, but you have to also pay homage and credit to Guy and Shireen Wood of 5001 Flavors, which many of you may be familiar with their earlier work, working with Puffy during the Bad Boy days of videos, and a lot of the leather custom stuff that you would see on Mace and Diddy, the leathers were all attributed to them, and most recently among their clients include DJ Khaled and Fat Joe, and they're in the custom pink outfit at the Grammys. And I can go on and on. There's so many wonderful people that mainstream has not given that same shine and attention to. And I think it's very important that while you walk this exhibition and we talk about the wonderful collaborations between designers and luxury brands, that we go back to the origins and the roots and center the narrative around the Black and brown designers who fueled this industry and the styles that we see today.
And I always say this on my tours, that I really think that Sean John is like a really pivotal moment in what people call hip hop fashion or celebrity fashion and its intersection with mainstream fashion. He was the first Black designer to win a CFDA award in 2004, and I think that really speaks a lot to what he was able to do with his brand and merge it with the mainstream industry, because everyone knew that this was important fashion that people were wearing, but it took the industry a little bit longer to recognize it. So there's a lot of kind of takeaways we want people to have from the exhibition. One is that women have been just as important in shaping hip-hop style as men. So can you talk a little bit about proposing the exhibition, why you wanted this to be an exhibition, and like the idea of kind of putting women side by side with men?
Sure. So obviously, having written the first book, I wanted to find another platform to retell and continue to tell those stories, and thought about it really in advance. I think timing is everything, which means that we got to be the first out of the gate to talk about this stuff. So I presented the idea in late 2018, and the idea was for it to be a multi-layered project, a symposium, a permanent archive within the museum's space, and of course this lovely symposium that you see today. There were a couple of objectives early on in fostering and creating that idea. We were going to be women of color curating an exhibition on a particular style and genre that had traditionally been told through a male perspective or lens. So that was really, really important. We share different lived experiences, and I think that's important in terms of how that drove the exhibition and the objects that would eventually become part of it. So we wanted to center that narrative. Courtney Sloan, who's a dear friend of mine who I've known forever and covered her at DNR, was an essential part of our team because we wanted her eyes and expertise as an architect, as an interior designer, as someone who has worked with hip-hop notables, her first client being Queen Latifah, working with Flavor Unit. She designed Bad Boys offices, Vibe magazine, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 25th anniversary exhibit. So this was totally in her lane. So we had the awesome team there, and with the support of Dr. Steele and the entire FIT Museum Collective, we began the hard task. And let me tell you, difficult, because we had so many things against us. Obviously, COVID did not help us at all. But we went to people's showrooms, people's homes. I went to a storage unit. We made thousands of phone calls, and have to thank our interns who did
Absolutely.
an amazing job helping us with the
Maurizio
research.
and Frida, thank you very much.
Yes, because we had to do the book and the exhibit simultaneously. While we're doing our PhD, while we're still doing our full-time jobs, there was no stop in any of this, right? And then add that I'm a single mom with 3 kids. So all of that, and figuring out the hardest part was the edit. You know, unfortunately, we were working with a particular size space. We could not have every single brand, and there were so many different reasons and how these brands got to be chosen and inserted. And by no means was it, if someone didn't make it, did it mean that it wasn't supposed to be in part of the story. But we decided that themes were really important because we wanted to break stereotypes. You know, while we are here celebrating hip hop style, let us not forget that Black and brown bodies get policed shopping while Black. So there's, you know, this complex relationship between hip hop and fashion. And I think because of the celebrity notoriety, it's made it more palatable. When I was covering this fashion beat, I had seen it transform in terms of its labels. And fashion needs labels to help kind of figure out where we're gonna put it in a department store space. So early on, I saw labels like ethnic or Black fashion, and then the industry settled on urban fashion being the more politically correct term, kind of associating with how the music was being categorized. That label lasted till about the 2000s, and then eventually it would kind of morph under the label of streetwear, which is what you are hearing now. But streetwear is a massive category that has quite a bit of history in terms of how the word is used, but it doesn't necessarily speak just to this genre of fashion. So it's challenging because the brands are important, but we want to make sure we have, you know, serious conversations as well. But I think overall we did a pretty good job of breaking those stereotypes down, that it's just not baggy jeans and big logoed objects. Yes, we do wear tailored clothing and dress up. That's always been a part of our origins in terms of dress. You'll see that if you look at the Fable early outfit, when you walk into the introduction gallery, you see the Lee jeans have permanent creases, which is an ode to tailored. There are also dress shoes. It's not just sneakers and Timberland boots, everybody.
So we could talk about this exhibition absolutely all day, and we absolutely hope that you go check it out. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
All right.
But I just want to, again, thank you all for coming. We have a great day of speakers for you guys today, and yeah, it's been a joy to work on this project.
And thank you, Liz. Without you, this wouldn't have been made possible. We were really a great team together, so
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Well, we have another great panel for you.